Do you ever have in your head those voices that create a feeling of anxiety and self-criticism? Have they affected your dancing? And do you know how to deal with them? Well, let's find out. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Zouk Nerds. In this episode, Guy and I will be sharing our experiences navigating this sea of anxiety, self-criticism, stress, and all of those things that Guy and I have experienced in our journey in dance. It's quite normal, but there are main key points that we want to talk about, and we'll be sharing some very useful tips on how to deal with them and how to transform them in something very powerful to bring into your dance. So, let's go! Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Zouk Nerds. My name is Alisson Sandi, and today we have our beautiful co-host here, Guy Prada. Hello, Guy.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good night. One more.
Good day, everybody, and I hope it is a beautiful day and you are all in positive vibes, because today we're going to be talking about something that often does not take us on a beautiful sunny day. We're going to be talking about anxiety. We're going to be talking about those negative voices in our head, the inner saboteur. And yes, as Guy would always say, the premise of this topic is about dance. But I'm sure that as we unravel this conversation, we are going to relate this to our personal life, our work life, our friendships and relationships, because, we all have those voices and they affect every aspect of our lives. So to start with, let's talk about identifying such things. So when we're talking about the inner saboteur or those negative voices, how do they come into play in our lives? For example, we're talking about that self-criticism that we often do to ourselves. We're talking about that tension or that hesitation about doing something, whether you know it or not, whether you have the experience or the knowledge of doing something or not. That hesitation that comes when we're experiencing something. And also the overthinking, the anxiety, which is very, very common, especially for me, a perfectionist who is an overthinker, who wants to do things as best as possible. For me, it definitely has been a journey. How about for you, Guy? Have you experienced this kind of things in your dancing?
Oh, yeah. So much. And these things started to happen more intensely, more often after starting working with it.
Oh, yeah.
Because, yeah. Nah. I remember when I was learning, not feeling so much of that anxiety of having those thoughts related to I'm not good enough for this, I'm not cut out for this, or something like that, because I think there was a path to be taken and I was comfortable in that path and taking my time. It was more getting inspired by the others, not so much getting to compare myself to the others. When I started teaching and working with this, then it changed a little bit. I needed to work all over again in my head in order to go back to that mindset of getting inspired by each other, not getting in this thing of like, oh my God, I cannot do what they do, therefore I'm not good enough for this. Or this is not what people want, what I have to offer. Or look at me versus look at them. They have so much more. I don't have nothing of these things. What are people looking and seeing a value in me? All these things start to come a lot more when I started working as a dancer.
Yeah. Absolutely. The same for me. As some of you may know from listening to previous episodes, I come from a military family background, which I don't know if this is in every country, but at least for me, in a Brazilian family plus the military background, I think that was not a very positive combination, because it always enforced me that I had to do the best and I didn't have to think about myself. Just get it done, do your best, your personal feelings, your personal emotions, are not priority as long as the job and the task is done. And that's pretty much how I went into dancing once I started working with it, which really disconnected the dancer that I was, the person that I was, from the art that I was doing. So looking back in retrospective, I believe that maybe for 10 years, I didn't do art from the heart. I did do art from a workplace, from a place of like, this is what needs to be delivered, therefore I will deliver, but not from a place of, this is what I'm feeling like I want to express and show. So I wasn't really being a true artist in the sense that I would like to have been. And it's interesting that you mentioned the inspiration and comparison, because I think this is a very difficult line to thread. When we're looking at other dancers as a social dancer, or when we're looking at other professionals as a professional, how to get inspired by others without looking at it and comparing it to yourself. How to look at Guy's social dancing beautifully gliding and flying across the floor and having the followers smiling, and not look at myself and go like, wow, but that doesn't happen when I dance, and actually looking at myself and seeing the positive about myself. That I think is something that I would say I can do better, but I'm maybe in a good place right now, but I still could do better.
Yeah, man, that's a very interesting reflection to make, I think, because comparison is still happening. You're still comparing. There's something that person does or experiences that I'm not experiencing right now. The thing I think is, what are the feelings that come associated with that thought process? For a long time, or when I started teaching, the feelings associated with that thought process were very negative. And I would find myself getting down and not really wanting to move towards acquiring the thing that I think can help me, get that quality that the other dancer has.
Yeah.
And when I think it's a source of inspiration, you compare, and the feelings that come are first feelings of appreciation. Look at what that person can do. So beautiful, so nice. Their craft is so incredible. Let me see how can I incorporate that to my dancing, because inspiration is a powerful source of learning, I think, a powerful source of knowledge, where you gather what is it that I can acquire that I don't have right now, coming from a place of comparison. So it's really what comes out of comparing yourself. I think that's more or less maybe that's the line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you think. Like, what is this line that you mentioned? Being comparison is still there, but what comes right after the comparison, I think, is where we start to get in trouble, no?
Yes. As you were speaking, I was thinking, how do I transform that comparison into inspiration? And to me, I think the best way that I can process in my head and speak is that I try to create the emotion and the dynamic and the playfulness that the other person is creating, not do what they're doing. Because I am me. I am this person and I'm not that person. So when I look at a dancer or a professional and I want to provide what that professional or dancer is providing to other people, whether it's while teaching a class or performing on the stage, competing on Jack and Jill, or just simply social dancing and socializing, I try to embrace and identify the emotions and the energy and how they're feeling that moment. And then I go like, okay, with what I have, with who I am, how can I provide a similar type of emotion and atmosphere? Because when I find myself comparing myself to others in terms of I cannot do that, or I want to know how to do that, that's when I think about myself negatively. So I try not to go into the comparison to what, but I want to get inspired by the result of what they did. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I take a particularly different route where I do exactly the opposite in the first part. It's like, oh, they're doing something that I don't know. And I go ahead and I try to do exactly what they're doing. I try to really imitate and copy and paste. And just to see how it feels on my body, just to see the feeling. And then transforming into something that I could feel comfortable with. Back
Right.
in the day when I was training with Kelsey, we would say, let's close embraceify this. Like we would
Yes.
see somebody doing something and then, okay, I think we got it. How can we make it feel like something that we would actually do within the flow that we have? So there's a lot of copying at first, like copy paste and then understanding. I think the copying would come more from a place of understanding the technique or understanding what is it that is going on
Yeah.
and then making my own. And there's another thing too. I remember feeling really inspired by Anderson at some point because of how he was social dancing. So he's social dancing, often a lot, smiling a lot. It looked like he was having fun the entire time. He was playing and making faces and stuff like that. And I remember I had more or less of a poker face when I would dance, more neutral,
The tanguero.
the tanguero, and sometimes that face more subtle
Hmm.
demonstrations of joy coming to my face. But I remember watching him dance all the time and I was like, man, this man looks to be very happy. I'm happy too. And just like the display of joy was different. And then I remember that I started wanting to smile more while I'm dancing. So I started bringing the smile to my face more intentionally, started smiling more and more intentionally. I don't know what happens. I think it's like laughter yoga or
Hmm.
these therapies where people say, repeat with me, ha, ha, ha. And then you go building up to the laughter.
Yeah.
I started doing laughter therapy with myself,
Hmm.
smiling more while I'm dancing. And then nowadays, it just comes out like this. So it came from me like wanting to smile as well, not because I was comparing myself to how much Anderson smile. It was more because I feel joy as well. And I want to display it in a way that my partner can see. So it was like a more or less forced smile that became completely authentic because it was just realizing that I was shy to smile that much. I was feeling insecure to smile that much, and then that went away. I don't know if that makes sense, if you
Yeah.
can relate to that.
It's exactly what I was going to say. The little part at the end. I also had the same thing. I had to practice the smile. And when I say that to students and to other people, they go like, "Oh, so you have to fake it?" "Mm, yes, but no, but maybe, but somehow." It's not faking the smile while you dance. It's more like getting used to that facial expression first and then connecting that with your inner feelings. Because to me, definitely it comes from shyness, from being somebody who is very closed off, very private. A lot of people misunderstand me as being like this person who is unfriendly or stuck up on a pedestal or something like that. But it's not. It's just that for me, it's very difficult to simply be open and socialize. In comparison, let's talk about Walter. Walter is like the guy that I inspire not to be, but I inspire to learn a little bit from. Like to understand how to simply enter a room and fill that room with energy. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. It's something that depending on how we are, we need to practice. And we need to practice to connect the face to the heart because the heart is feeling it. Like, true, totally. It was feeling from day one, or even if my face is completely like closed and serious, there is happiness there. But the way that I'm showing it is different. But nowadays, yes, I feel that it's very natural. I don't even think. I'm just always smiling, smiling, smiling. Even when things are not the way that I would like them to be, or if the music is not exactly how I like to dance at that moment, I will still smile, because in the end of the day, dance is something that I want to be celebrating at all times. Anytime, anywhere, anyhow. For me, if I'm dancing, I'm celebrating.
And I think there is nothing wrong actually to, they say maybe yes, but no, but somehow there is nothing wrong about forcing a little bit. I think this word forcing, especially in English, has such a strong connotation to it and implies fakeness. I don't think that is fake. You're not forcing something that is not there. You are forcing something that is there, but has a difficulty to come out. So you have to get to articulate your face in the ways that you know how to put the thing out. Some of the therapies that I did in my life were all about that actually. Smiling, making sounds. For example, for some people, it's really hard to make sounds, although they are experiencing something that they could make a sound related to it. It's hard for them to make sounds, so you need to put the sound out. There is a water temple in Bali, actually, that after the ceremony, you go into the river and there's a waterfall falling. And the whole idea is that you put your head inside of the waterfall and then you scream as loud as you can. So the idea is for you to purge, is for you to put out everything and let the water take it away. And I remember getting to the river, putting my head in the waterfall and having a hard time screaming. I was feeling the desire to do so, but it was not coming out. I needed to put the efforts into it. So nothing wrong for me in you putting the smile out a little bit more in a way that is not, completely organic, or that is coming from a place of almost reflex, you having to make it happen. But over time, you will come from a place of you feel and you express. You feel and you express. You just practice, I think.
Yeah, I asked my beautiful AI assistant here for some synonyms. I forgot the word.
Synonyms.
Synonyms, that word. For other ways to saying it. And one that I think we can use here is heavily influencing it instead of forcing it. So
Yes.
You're influencing it, you're influencing your face, you're intentionally creating influence to your expressions, but not just a little bit. You're really, really, really doing with intention, with passion. I want my face to show the feelings that I have. Therefore, I need to practice that. And I think this is something that really helps the inner saboteur. I was talking to a student last night, actually, and I was telling them that, sometimes, why don't you wear some colorful clothes? So this student only wears black all the time. And I told him, for over 10 years, I wore black all the time. And when I quit dance in 2016, I was going through a lot of therapy, and then eventually I got back into dancing. And my mom, for a long time, she always said, why don't you buy some colorful clothes? Why don't you, wear some colorful clothes? And I'm like, oh, Mom, I just like to be efficient. My brain is already so busy every day, all day. So if I just wear black, everything, it's one less thing to think. But, at that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. And just by changing the color of the clothes that I wear, that influenced everything in me and the people around me. The same thing with the face. Just thinking about before I enter a class or before I enter a space where there's people, I think to myself, I say, okay, how are you feeling? You feeling good? You feeling happy? Okay, let's show it with your entire body. Instead of entering a room all closed off because maybe I was walking in the street, I was taking the public transport, and I have that wall that you do, or that bubble. And sometimes you enter that friendly dance class within that bubble. And then everybody's like, "Ooh, don't touch. Let's not do that." So I think that for me, when I'm in situations that I do feel the anxiety, the hesitation, the inner voices, I then take myself from that place into my happy bubble. By doing what? By doing things that I know makes me feel good. So I have many body injuries, and I often have a little bit lower back pain here, or chest pain here, or neck pain here. So when I feel that, what do? I try to tell my body everything is okay. So you see, maybe sometimes me in the corner or even in class, I'm just like rolling my hip or rolling my neck or rolling my chest. It's kind of like a practice that I've developed to tell myself everything is okay, everything's happy, let's not be upset, let's not get worse. Because I find that in the old days, when I was accepting and like diving and like drowning myself into that pain, it would only get worse. So every time I felt a little back pain, I would go like, "Oh guys, no, my back hurts. Oh, my back hurts." And I would make the entire room go dark. My life was dark. The entire room was dark. The food was cold, and like there were no rainbows outside. Just because I allowed myself to drown myself into that little discomfort. And guess what? What you think, you are. So then that pain became everything about my day. But nowadays I just like to say, "Hi, pain." And then I tell the rest of my body to go like, "Okay, let's make sure that that pain is not taking over. So everything else is still happy. Everything else is still flowing. Everything else is very colorful." That's kind of like how I apply to my dancing. Sometimes I'm not feeling like my musicality is great on that day. Maybe I'm not connecting with the music. So I think, okay, how can I use everything else that is working well to then, influence this maybe one thing that is not working well? Or when I'm in a private lesson with a student and they're like, "Oh, my turns, all my turns." And then I try to kind of like switch their focus into going like, "Oh, wow, that elasticity, yes. That was beautiful. Okay, yes. Now that footwork, yes. Feel that floor a little bit more." And then suddenly the turn just gets better because they were so fixated in that part of their turn that it was affecting their connection, and they were going off time, and they were doing things that they don't have any issues with. But they were like allowing themselves to drown themselves in that one thing. And before I pass this to Guy, I just want to say, I'm not saying that I have mastered this and I'm on top of the mountain like Buddha myself. I'm just saying and sharing this as things that I practice with myself and my students. And hopefully this can be helpful to you, because I think we all need a little bit of help every now and then.
Yeah. It's a daily practice. And I think in this world of dance and art, it's even more at times. There are constantly reminders of what you are not. There are constantly reminders of the things you can't do. And like changing the lenses on how you look at those things is so much of a practice. And in the ecosystem of Brazilian Zouk these days, and maybe the other dances as well, a lot of things revolve around looking at yourself in comparison to others, especially when we take into account social media, when we take into account competitions, when we start taking into account these elements that are so alive in our dance scenes these days, this process becomes, I think, even more complex, of comparing yourself to the other people and getting constant reminder of what you are not. And as a teacher, we encounter that so much with students, especially in private lessons. Yeah, so you were mentioning the private lesson. And I remember several private lessons where the first question I ask is there anything specific you'd like to work on? And most answers are, "I want to get better." And my response is, "What does better mean to you?" And then the person glitches a little bit. There's a little bit of a thinking. What does the better mean? You know, and most people say, I want to feel good when I'm dancing. I want to get more invitations to dance. I want my invitations to be accepted. And I dance with the person. And sometimes I say, the thing I think you can do is to try a little less hard. Think you're trying too hard to perfectly execute the things, trying too hard to do your arms while you're doing your turns. Try less hard. And then I go exactly what Alisson was doing, this weight transfer. Amazing. This elasticity, super nice. There are several things you are doing that are really good. Let's look into these things. Let's focus onto these things. And then we were talking about this in the previous episodes. The specific thing about partner dancing is that an art form that you practice with someone else, for someone else, with someone else. And that relationship with the other person is, when we talk about the core, which is social dancing, the thing that matters most, really. So, to my understanding, getting better at this dance, for me, is getting better at communicating with the other person as you dance with them. So getting better at lead and follow, getting better at comfort. What does that mean, getting better? Understanding more things, becoming more sensitive to changes in pressure, changes in tension, changes in weight transfer, you know? Sometimes several people reach a level of proficiency in those skills that, to my understanding, especially back in the day, you are good to go. You know, if your goal is to go to the social and have a good time, you are good to go. You have all the tools that you need to do that. Getting better after this point, then the question comes, what do you want to get better? You want to get even more sensitive, even more aware. Let's work on lead and follow. Let's work on these things. You want to develop specific skills within the dance. I want to get better at spinning, so let's spin. I want to get better at turning, so let's turn. You know, so there are the things that are essential, in my understanding. Things that are essential for partner dancing, and the things that are extras. So the essential are the lead and follow techniques, the comfort of everything, communicating with your partner, understanding when you adapt, when your partner adapts, the compensation system, floor craft, understanding the floor, all these things. Other skill sets that you want to get better at, they're not essential for you to social dance, but they add elements for you to speak more, you know, for you to express yourself more. You know what I mean? So I think in the end of the day, when we go into our heads, especially for you that are learning right now or that are being exposed to the dance style that you are learning right now, and for the Brazilian Zouk people that listens to us the most, when you are starting this thing and you see a trend and you, for example, a trend, what is the current trend? Desprezada doing a plank on the floor for the leaders. Touch the floor during the desprezada. Let's say that that's the trend right now. And you're like, God damn it, I need to get better. I need to learn. I need to learn how to touch the floor during the desprezada and don't fall, you know? So understand that touching the floor during the desprezada is not essential for you to social dance, but is a skill that you would like to acquire because you want to express yourself in that way. So the fact that you don't know how to touch the floor during the desprezada doesn't mean that you suck, or doesn't mean that the person that knows how to do that is better than you. They know one thing that you don't, and it can be learned. But sometimes the person that touches the floor during the desprezada is not as comfortable as you are, doesn't shift weight as comfortably or as clearly as a shift weight. And sometimes if you look at it, the person that touches the floor during the desprezada maybe doesn't dance as often as you in terms of like when they're social dancing, they dance less, or they get less invitations, or they dance, you know, different things. Just people are different, you know. So for us, dance people, I think is understanding the essential, you know, and I think when you have that in mind and compare yourself to someone else, that comparison, that inner voice saying, I'm not good enough, maybe will silence because it will not come from the place of, I don't know how to do that, therefore I'm not good. You know, I don't know how to do that, therefore I'm going to learn it. You know, so it just changes the internal discourse. Right, Alisson, because how many times we went into a private and the student was like, fix me. And you dance with them and you say, this is good, this is good, this is good. And they were like, but, you're like, no, no buts, that was it. Yeah, it was pretty good. I think what we can learn, I think what we can work on is these things here, because they come with the mindsets, there's something wrong that I'm doing that needs to be fixed. I don't know if you probably went through this experience, many times.
Absolutely. And a question that I love to ask at the very, very beginning of a private lesson, after the greetings and the hellos, is, well, what would you like to work on? And they may say something, or they may be like, no, I'm just here and I trust you. And I just want you to like check my dancing and let me know what I need to work on. Then I follow up and I ask, so what is working well with your dancing? What are you happy with your dancing? Bro, 90% of the times they just freeze. Big eyes, and they're like, I've never thought about that in my dancing, or I've never heard anybody asking me this, or like they're totally frozen. The system just collapses. It's very, very rare when a student can just, without even blinking, say it. Oh, well, I like this about my dancing. I like this about my dancing. Very rare. And that is because, unfortunately, a lot of us, when we're learning, we're focusing on the things that are wrong, or the things that need to fix, or the things that are not working, instead of looking at both sides, looking at the things that are good but can be better, and the things that are okay that can be good, like kind of putting things into levels instead of white or black, right or wrong. Well, my timing is good, but I would like to be more comfortable when the speed changes, or when the beat goes away, the strong instrumental goes away, or, well, I'm happy with my patterns and my variations of movements, but I would like to be more comfortable if it doesn't work well. If I lead something and my follower doesn't understand it, speaking from a leader's perspective, or maybe what the followers usually say, well, I'm happy with my technique and my social dancing in general, but I would like to be more comfortable when I don't know what's happening, and when I don't recognize the movement or the technique that is going on. I would like to get better at that. So I think it's very much being careful and paying attention to the words that you use and the way that you build your sentences. You can simply tell yourself or your teacher, my connection is terrible because when I dance with advanced dancers, they don't like my dancing and they seem bored, and that, like you're feeding that negativity by speaking that way. But if you come to yourself and look at your dancing and go like, okay, I've been dancing for 12 months. I've learned this and this and this. My basic step used to be bumpy. Now my basic step is smooth. My turns, I used to lift my shoulders and be very tense, but now I feel like my turns, I can even sometimes put a little bit of torsion and have a little bit of a tilt styling. So seeing those things and then looking at it and thinking, what's next? What would I like to achieve next that is going to complement my dancing, instead of comparing yourself to somebody else or comparing your dancing results to when a certain leader or a certain follower dances with another person and you're like, well, when they dance with me, they don't look like that or they don't feel that way. It's tricky. I'll tell you, it's tricky. I mean, now 20 years into this, and I would say that only in the last 5+ years that I feel comfortable and I feel safe talking about it and being in a good headspace. Before that, I just didn't know it. I didn't have the guidance, the training, the cognitive knowledge to understand my emotions and process all of this anxiety. The earlier that you can start working on this, the more you're going to enjoy your journey, and hopefully the longer this journey is going to be in your dancing life.
As you're saying there, Alisson, it reminds me that we tend to think a lot in a dualistic point of view, where there's a good and a bad, a comfortable and an uncomfortable. And sometimes it's hard for us to see the spectrum, everything that exists in between these two elements here that we tend to think more immediately towards. Reminded me of a class, a private lesson, and I may have mentioned this private lesson here in one of our episodes because it was so important to me for reflection. The follower came for a private because she saw me dance with her friends, saw me doing all these things, and then with her, I didn't do the same things. And she told me, but I know how to do those things. Why don't you let me to those things? You know? And it's a process of comparison that happened on her end. She saw me dance with her friends, create an expectation on how the dance would be when I danced with her, and the dance was different. You know, so I commended her for coming to me to ask. So she didn't go home wondering and didn't go home thinking there was something wrong with her. She was curious. And in the process, I investigated my decision-making process. Why do I do these things with this person? Why do I do these things with other person? And then things of didn't follow, things of the technique came out. The thing that caught my attention the most was how many times is that happening? And it's basically what you mentioned, right, Alisson? Like when you see someone dancing with this other person and then see dancing with you and then see dancing with the other person, noticing then having different experiences with each one of them. So in the end for me is us trying to understand that even though someone danced with someone else and did X things and they dance with you and then they do Y things, it doesn't mean that because they did X things with the other person, Y things with you, that that dance was better than this one, or that that dance was, I don't know, more ... than this one. Understanding that they're just different. And then, like you said, Alisson, understanding your own path. 12 months into the dance, my bass is a little better, my torsion is developing. All these things, it's a silent process taking place on the back that your partner dancing with you doesn't necessarily know, but they feel the level of awareness in the body. And they will decide what to do or what not to do based on that. So that's the communication process going on. You know, so it's almost like you have a more serious conversation with someone, and with the other person, you have a more humorous conversation. It doesn't mean that the more humorous conversation is better than the serious one. Sometimes the serious conversation has a lot of enlightenment moments. You know, sometimes the humorous conversation is more on the surface. You don't go deep. You know, it varies so much. So that was a good reminder, Alisson, I think, for everybody to try and keep that in mind the next time they go out to social dance or they go to a class and they see people dance with their friends. Trying not to see like, oh, he did all these things with my friends. Hopefully he will do it to me, you know. I had this conversation too with another couple of artists that they were in a weekender and they were doing a Q&A, and those questions start to come out. Participant told, I see you doing all these things in the demo with your partner. I train all these things, hoping when we social danced, he would do all these things. But then when we social danced, we did nothing, you know, which is none of those things from the demo. And then he had to go and explain all these things in the weekender. And I think that was amazing, you know, so people can also see the differences in things, see the differences in circumstances as well. The circumstances changing, the demo circumstance is so different from a social dance circumstance. The demo, the person is dancing with someone that they probably danced for a long time and they're wanting to showcase something. The social dancing, you're getting to know your person sometimes from zero. So you gotta take it slower, you know? So all these things, right, Mestre? I think there's so much to talk about this. And I think we keep going here for a long time.
Exactly. In the topic of expectations on what other people would do when they dance with you, I don't know why, but as you were speaking, my brain kind of gave me this example of chemistry. We are different elements. So, two elements combined together, they form one thing, and then combined with another element form something different. So, like, literally, we're all so different that we cannot expect the same result from a different combination. Our life experience, our dance experience, the way we listen to music,
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting. I saw a YouTube documentary about sound, how different people hear the same music completely different because of how our ears work. We just think that everybody's ear hears the music the same way we do. But it's so not true. The same song, your best friend vibes may be different than you, and you wonder why. Well, yes, it could be taste, it could be so many things. But just think about this. What's getting inside, it's actually different from what's getting inside your ear. And I mean, not necessarily what's getting inside, but the way you're processing and the way your body and your brain is processing it, it's different. The way we step on the floor, the way we hold each other's hand, the way some people are more comfortable touching other people's skin and other people are less comfortable touching other people's skin, all of those things. Let's say Guy is a 10 on comfortable touching skins, and I'm a 9.5. That half is going to change something in the dance at some point, somehow. It's just going to. So it's unreasonable to expect something like what you see when they're dancing with other people.
Yeah, exactly. So in the end, for me, and what I would tell everybody that is listening, the internal voices, that the self-sabotaging voices that come, they will come in different forms, in different stages, and in the different roles that you play, whatever scene that you are a member of. For example, for us, we have these voices in regards to teaching a lot, in regards to performing a lot, and in regards to showing up, how we show up. Like Alisson was saying, that he was talking about Walter. So for the students, someone that is coming in, it might be, I'm not as better as this other person there that I'm watching. You know, I need to get this, I need to get that. For the organizer, for example, there is this, am I good enough to throw this event? Am I good enough to, who am I to have this school, to have this event? Who am I to start this class? You know, so like at different moments, there are different roles that you play. There are just different voices. And my invitation that I do for everybody and for myself is to try and look at the whole ecosystem around you. Try to look at the whole that's going on, and also understanding the complexity of circumstances that they are. Like Alisson was talking about. In my case, for example, with the student that asked about why I didn't lead the same things that I led on their friend, it could have been the music, for example, that I was dancing with her versus with the other one. It could have been how much space I had. It could have been how energized I was versus how not. So there's so many other elements. Now that you mentioned, it occurred to me, because not one thing that is influencing all the other. There are several things influencing other several things. And there is a psychologist that I follow. She said something really interesting, that she said, when we think about ourselves, we tend to think of the complexity of things that caused us to make a decision. When we think about other people, we don't give them the same treatment. We sometimes think that their decision making, it was simple. So we simplify what took someone to make decision A or B. Versus when we think about ourselves, we know, but I have this going on, I have this other thing going on, these things are happening in my life. So the invitation that she made, and after she talked about this, I realized how much I was doing that and how much I default to that. I try now to see a decision on someone else as a complex web of events that is guiding someone to make a decision just like for me. So that's an invitation that I bring up here because I think it's relevant for the topic, for this topic of the inner sabotage, the inner saboteur that we have in our brains.
And one last thing that I'm going to give you guys is an exercise that I've learned with group therapy to do, and I invite students to do sometimes if they're comfortable, which is nothing crazy. But basically, they tell me, well, I want to get better with dancing. And then I ask, why? And then they give me an answer. And then I ask, why? And they give me another answer. And then I ask, why? And it keeps going. So it's something that you can do it yourself. You can just say, I want to improve my dancing. Why? Because I want to get asked more. Why? Because that would make me happier. Why? And then go down. And sometimes you're going to find something very, very powerful, or sometimes you're just going to understand your process better. And either way, it's good. I believe that it's good to know yourself better, because a lot of the times we're actually disconnected with our why. We're disconnected to why we're doing this. You're going to get better, and then in the end of the day, it's just because every time you get better, you feel happier, and that's it. But then you could also realize that you want to get better because you see other people getting asked to dance more. And that's an external thing. And that's something that I believe it's better for you to learn how to disconnect. Don't be connected to the external things. Be connected to your internal things. I want to get better because sometimes I dance and my body just like tingles and I have this happiness that lasts for weeks. Great. Let's do it. Let's work 10 hours a day because I want you to feel that way every time. But if you're doing it for external reasons, then I think we need to refocus that. So doing this exercise is quite valuable, quite powerful. So I highly recommend you to do that if you are inclined to do it. If you're scared of doing this alone, which may be very scary, maybe do that with your friend, do that with somebody next to you, just so they can be there and support you if something too strong comes up, and they can be there to hold your hand. But it's very, very nice. Every time I do it, the students kind of like feel this weight lifted off their back, and they feel like, oh, okay, yeah. Wow. I was stressing so much for something that doesn't really make sense. Okay, now I get it. So let's actually scratch everything that I said that I wanted to do. I want to focus on something else because that's what's going to lead me to have more fun social dancing. Usually that happens. So I invite you and let us know how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
And with that in mind, I think it's a good time for us to close this episode. And thank you once again for being here with us. Thank you for joining us on our podcast or watching us on the video form on Spotify. And please connect with us on YouTube and on Instagram as well, where we're posting our short versions where you can learn a little bit throughout the day. Whenever you have a little bit of time, you can go to our page there and just listen to maybe a minute or a minute and a half of things that we speak here instead of waiting until you have the time to watch the full episode. So thank you very much, everybody. Beijos. Abraços and ciao.
Bye, everyone.